let's talk first about this drawdown because recently there have been 11 days in May where we saw 60% some odd drawdown, 70% plus in some DeFi assets, 66% I think maybe more down in ETH. Bitcoin's been slumping. Some people are saying this is the end of the bull run, so we might not hit those heady predictions that you were thinking of earlier. So, like, what's your take on that? Is this the end of the bull run? Is this a pause, or are we doing something else here?
Um, I don't think it's the end of the bull run at all. And like, I kind of have trouble defining what like a bull run is in crypto. I think there's a bull run kind of at any given time in any place. Bitcoin has probably a 10 or 20 year adoption cycle that it's going to live through, but it's already, a good way through that story. Ethereum is just the beginning, and there's going to be these periods of volatility and drawdowns. But the story on a longer time frame is just that adoption is increasing. Institutional financial places are able to actually use and custody this stuff, and Wall Street and basically all institutional allocators are now considering this a real asset class. And so saying that the bull run over doesn't really take those things into kind of mind. And the thing that we learned kind of going out and raising for our second fund was that there's probably we're underestimating by 1 to 2 orders of magnitude the amount of capital that's on the sidelines that's waiting to come off and into some productive and interesting assets. And it kind of just depends on, how far away are they from being convinced of, your given asset or whatever you prefer, to allocate to. And I think the reality is that Bitcoin is amazing in times where things are really pessimistic and when the world seems to be going to shit. But not that many people own gold, that are institutional investors. The people who have gotten rich over the past 20 years have gotten rich allocating to venture funds, buying the dip on technology stocks, looking at productive assets that have a high growth rate and a large TAM. And, those things just look and feel like Ethereum, and they look and feel like DeFi. And so, when people say the bull run's over, it's like, I just kind of feel like they spend too much time on Twitter and not talking to people. And I'm fully aware that people don't have the privilege of talking to these large institutional allocators, but those people are very bullish, and it's just about kind of form fitting the story of Ethereum and the form fitting of the story of DeFi to kind of what they want.
Would you say that people have gotten rich on, like, wealthy on optimism rather than pessimism historically? And do you draw that distinction between sort of the Bitcoin investment thesis and maybe the Ethereum DeFi investment thesis? One is optimistic, the other is pessimistic.
I think it would have been very hard to analyze Ethereum through a cynical lens. Same with DeFi. You just have to be optimistic when you look towards the future. And I think that's, one of the principles that we have at Framework is just like, being a perpetual optimist, believing in what you're doing. That is a force multiplier when you kind of, extend that across multiple projects or investments or even things that you're doing generally. And so we always kind of strive to take that forward-looking optimistic approach. But I think the converse can be said about, Bitcoin in a lot of ways. It's a hedge for, the worst of times. It's largely a finished product that has no endogenous catalyst on the roadmap. Really everything that's happening to Bitcoin right now, in my view, and this is a little bit biased, is, people waiting for exogenous catalysts, people coming off the sidelines and allocating to Bitcoin. And for us, it's just a little bit difficult to kind of, see something as a roadmap and a future and catalyst and pick Bitcoin over that. And I think a lot of institutional allocators are realizing the same. And, if you look at the ETH BTC ratio, it's almost tripled, in the past, I think, 6 months. And it's easy to kind of be in the space and to think that, because Bitcoin is consensus within the space, other people will realize that, but not everyone else is coming in with the same set of shared values and context as those early kind of, libertarian leaning people. Like, a lot of people want to see something that looks and feels like traditional technology. And I think that's very much where the world is heading.
See, David, it's okay that we're optimistic permabulls. It's fine. Vance says it's fine.
Yeah, Vance, I want to actually dig in on this subject. And this is actually not something that we had in the agenda, but it's intrinsically interesting to me. And I think for the listeners as well, because we've had some back and forth with some Bitcoiners lately about just, about the whole, ETH BTC debate, right? I can't remember who said this, but they said something along the lines of like, it's really baked into your genetics what side you fall on. Do you fall on like the Ethereum DeFi side, or do you fall on the Bitcoin side? And some people just they find resonance with one side or the other, and that's where they call home. And so how do you see with you and how you invest at Framework and like the culture that you've created at Framework? How does your personal disposition direct what you choose to focus on and and how you choose to invest, and how do you think that becomes also true for other venture investments and speculators in this space as well?
Yeah, so Framework has never invested in Bitcoin, and I just don't think that's in our mandate. We're a venture fund that invests in founders at the earliest stages, and that's really kind of what we like to do at the end of the day is invest in people. And there's a lot of meat on the bone when you look at DeFi, whether it's the kind of primitives or the aggregators or just the different kind of consumer applications that people are building on top of it. And it's inspiring to work with those people. And there is an ecosystem around Bitcoin, albeit a lot smaller. It's concentrated around the Lightning Network. It's concentrated around basically different forms of hyper Bitcoinization for developing countries. And I think kind of what I've been seeing is that stablecoins are really taking a lot of wind out of that sail. Depending on how you think of the U.S. dollar or Bitcoin's kind of store of value properties. The evidence is relatively clear in these developing countries that people are choosing stablecoins over Bitcoin just because it's a little bit more functional. And things trend towards utility over time. And that's kind of where we kind of seek to play. And I think any potential flippening will be bullish long-term for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think, Bitcoin is burdened by the expectations of having to carry the entire space, which, props to Bitcoin, it's fulfilled over time. There were times where we needed the coherent, narrative of Bitcoin to tie the space together through the bear market, even though Ethereum was building it was kind of an open question as to whether ETH would be a real project, a couple of years down the road. But Bitcoin really did hold the space together. And now it feels like, just as this number one asset, it has the burden of expectation of doing basically everything, being technology, being money, being all these things to everyone. And if there's a flippening and ETH proves to be just this massive technology layer, Bitcoin can settle into a bit of a more comfortable, albeit smaller TAM as just being digital gold. And I think that's a perfectly amazing outcome for all the Bitcoiners out there, because it's still a gigantic market and there's still probably 10 to 100x upside, but it's not going to be the end all be all, and that's totally fine. And getting past that event horizon, I think, and getting past the fear will be really bullish for Bitcoin itself. I think the community will become a lot less striking. That'd be how I would put it.
Angry.